Over at the Daily Caller, Peter Hassan has a piece today. New York Times whitewashes Democrats' ties to anti-Semite Farrakhan. And I would remind everybody, and as I have many times, the New York Times also whitewashed the Holocaust. Now, how can you be the paper of record where all these clown columnists want to work, including these fake conservatives? How could you want to be a writer, whether on the news side or the opinion side, for a newspaper that did everything it could to cover up the Holocaust? I'd say that's worse than anything anybody has done or said on TV lately. In effect, Holocaust deniers. The New York Times. And now look at this. More on the denying side. The New York Times whitewashed several Democrats' ties to the Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan in an article that ran in Wednesday's newspaper. Wednesday is today. I do not think it's a coincidence that yesterday I was trashing the Democrats' ties to Farrakhan. Right, Mr. Producer? So immediately, the New York Slimes comes to their defense. Farrakhan is a notorious racist and anti-Semite who has praised Adolf Hitler as a very great man, called white people devils, blamed Jews in Hollywood for gay marriage, and described Jews as satanic. Several congressional Democrats have ties to Farrakhan, and the leaders of Women's March have publicly declared their support for him. As I recall, Comey's family, his wife and daughters, were in that march. Now, the Times article today focused on Democratic congressional candidate Leslie Cockburn, a former journalist running to replace Virginia Republican Tom Garrett. Virginia Republicans have accused Cockburn of anti-Semitism over an anti-Israel book that she authored in 1991. The New York Times portrayed the accusations against Democrat Cockburn as emblematic of a larger battle on the left. Quote, for the Democratic Party, Ms. Cockburn's candidacy could come to represent more than a single House seat, wrote reporters Tom Kaplan and Michael Tackett. The two reporters went on to paint a misleading picture of Democratic ties to Farrakhan. They said the Democratic National Committee's deputy chairman, Representative Keith Ellis of Minnesota, has spent years trying to get beyond past associations with Louis Farrakhan, the anti-Semitic leader of the Nation of Islam. But conservative news media continues to try and tar Democrats by linking them to Mr. Farrakhan. He is linked to Farrakhan, you liars! And Mr. Trump has used his Middle East policies to try and drive a wedge between Jewish voters and the Democratic Party. Listen to these sick minds. Even as openly anti-Semitic candidates in Wisconsin, Illinois, and California run for office as Republicans. That paragraph was misleading in three ways, writes the Daily Caller's Peter Hassan. First, as the Daily Caller reported, and as the Washington Post fact-check confirmed, Ellison actually misled the public for years about his relationship with Farrakhan. The New York Times depiction that Ellison spent years trying to get beyond past associations with Farrakhan resembles Ellison's own spin. Here's how Ellison answered questions about his ties to Farrakhan in December 14, 2016 appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe. This Scarborough is such a sleazeball. We're talking about something that happened in 1995, said Keith X. Ellison. This was the year that the Million Man March took off. People were attacking the march at the time. Man, I'm telling you, back in 2006 and before, I disavowed them. That's the ridiculous thing about this, that we kept on having to answer this kind of stuff. Washington Post awarded the claim 4 Pinocchios, the worst possible rating in the D.C. paper's fact check. And by the way, their rating is a joke. So when they're doing this to Ellison, you take notice. Second, the New York Times claimed that conservative news media continues to try and tar Democrats by linking them to Mr. Farrakhan and linked to a DCNF article. The New York Times did not reach out to the DCNF, Daily Caller, for comment and didn't respond to a request for a comment on this report. In addition to impugning this reporter's motives, without citing any evidence whatsoever, the Times portrayed reporting on Democrats' Farrakhan ties as akin to a smear. The New York Times did not mention that Democrat Illinois Representative Danny Davis praised Farrakhan in 3 different interviews with this reporter in February and March, including a March 5 interview where Davis said he wasn't bothered by Farrakhan's answer to, quote-unquote, the Jewish question. Davis's hometown paper, the Chicago Tribune, slammed the congressman for his relationship with Farrakhan in an editorial that was cited by the Daily Caller. Democratic Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii called Farrakhan unacceptable in a progressive coalition or any political coalition on March 8, after Farrakhan again accused Jews of secretly controlling the FBI to persecute black people. That same day, Democratic South Carolina Representative James Clyburn declined to condemn Farrakhan's anti-Semitism in a statement addressing why he shared a stage with the Nation of Islam leader. Clyburn, the number 3 Democrat in the House, still has yet to denounce Farrakhan. It took Davis just under 6 weeks to distance himself from Farrakhan's anti-Semitism after praising the Nation of Islam leader as an outstanding human being in a February 5 interview with this reporter. Third, the Times used fringe anti-Semites denounced by the Republican Party to downplay ties between Farrakhan and longtime Democratic members of Congress. The paper noted that openly anti-Semitic candidates in Wisconsin, Illinois, and California are running for Congress as Republicans, but did not inform their readers that Republicans have denounced and condemned all 3 anti-Semites, none of whom have a serious chance of winning an election. Meanwhile, the Democratic politicians who refuse to renounce their association with a prominent racist and anti-Semite remain influential members of Congress. So the New York Times steps up yet again and defends the worst of the worst. And the Democrat Party refuses to condemn Farrakhan, his racism, his anti-Semitism, and the organization he leads. Absolute crickets. Why is that? Why does Farrakhan get away with this? Why isn't he condemned on CNN? Why isn't he condemned on MSNBC? Why isn't he condemned by the New York Times? What's holding them back?